Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today we're digging deep. We're looking at how archaeological findings are supporting biblical stories.
Yeah, we're going to look at some of the most amazing archaeological finds of all times, like the earliest mentions of God, the earliest mentions of Jesus Christ in the archaeological record, and a lot of other really cool, interesting things.
So grab your Indiana Jones hats, your Bible, and your shovel, and let's dig in.
All right, guys, I'm really excited to get started on this episode. It's good to have you guys in the studio again. Ryan,
sure.
Father Rich.
Hey, guys.
Great being with you guys.
Good to have you guys listening in. We're ready to get going.
Yeah, archaeology to me has always been one of the very most fascinating of the sciences. Understanding history and then understanding scripture through the lens of history and reconciling that our church and the Catholic faith is not a faith based on abstractions. This was a faith of skin and bones and of dirt and stones. I mean, there was real people in real places in real times that have left behind an amazingly and surprisingly intact archaeological record that not only supports most of what the Bible says, but it also enlightens our understanding of what life was like and why, and understanding our faith through the prism of historicity.
Mm-hmm. To be able to dig your hands into the history and the foundations of society and civilization is a pretty special thing to do. Archaeology has always been an interest of mine since I was a little kid. I mean, I had books on it, and I would imagine, like Indiana Jones, going back and like kind of discovering the Ark, you know what I mean? Like, I still remember watching that movie with my grandfather. But, you know, when I was in studies in the seminary, I actually got to participate at an archaeological site in Magdala and dig my hands into that earth.
That's cool.
It was really, it was fascinating.
That's on the Sea of Galilee, right?
It's right on the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
So it was really illuminating, and to see and to feel and literally dig your hands into the earth.
And break an M4 and be like, and cover it back up.
And then just kind of walk away.
You get an F in the class.
Hey, Richard, did you find anything? I didn't find nothing.
No, and clearly we're not archaeologists, right? We're seminarians studying, a biblical archaeology class with Father Bill Burton, one of my favorite classes throughout my time in seminary. But, they obviously like zone a place that there is absolutely nothing of note, and then they let people come in and just kind of participate in the dig.
It was kind of like, one of those sandboxes.
Kids just playing. Older kids in a sandbox.
They put a little
You're
rock inside.
archaeologists.
Go sit for gold.
Oh, wow, you found a rock. I'm going to put this on the
so
shelf.
Proud of you. Like we're painting it,
Now, before we dig into what archaeologists have found, why don't you tell our listeners and our watchers how they can find more of us?
And you can dig in at www.catholictalkshow.com. I just wanted to make sure I got that.
Yeah.
You can subscribe, and then you'll be able to see exactly how you could listen in or view. We're on YouTube, we're on Stitcher, iTunes, and there's a lot of options for you, Spotify. So make sure that you're exploring those options. If you're commuting with us, going to work, or sneaking a headphone in while you're working, we want to make sure that you can access us on all platforms. And certainly we're on social media, so Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And for our Patreons out there, those people who are supporting us financially so that the show can continue to grow and we can continue to produce these engaging topics for you, make sure that you're checking us out on patreon.com/The Catholic Talk Show. And we really appreciate the support.
It's /Catholic Talk Show. There's no the.
No the?
There's
Catholic
no the.
Talk Show.
Catholic Talk Show.
Get it right, people.
It's look, if you're watching this, you probably went to our website. You're looking at the page. There's a link there. Just click that. It's simple. It's easy.
Absolutely.
It's super
Thanks
easy.
for making it so easy for everybody, guys.
It's very charitable.
I seek to serve and accommodate.
So what are you going to serve and accommodate us with today, Sheil? What's the first topic?
So I think the first thing that I'd want to talk about is that the patron saint of archaeology. And we've talked about this. We've touched on this on a few other episodes, but really archaeology is my favorite subject. And the patron saint of archaeology is Constantine's mother, St. Helena.
That would make sense. Because she was the one who discovered the cross and a number of other artifacts as well.
She sought all these things.
Yeah. So after the Battle of the Milvian Bridge and the Edict of Constantine legalizing Christianity and making it the state religion,
Edict of Milan.
Milano.
Not Constantine.
Let's-
I mean, this is
same
me
thing.
correcting
It's the
you
same
for the
thing.
first time
It's the
in
same thing.
40 episodes.
It's the same thing. Jerk. But anyway, Constantine sent his mother, St. Helena, down to the Holy Land, and she went, and this is not too far removed from the time that our Lord walked the earth and the apostles, and there was very strong local traditions, and still most of these structures are there, and she went down to the Holy Land, and she was able to find the spots that we still know today, like the site of the birth of Christ, the site of the Annunciation, the site of the crucifixion, the Holy Sepulchre, and the true cross. So St. Helena really did. She was the first biblical archaeologist, and she's definitely worth noting. And we still enjoy
Her discoveries.
to this day. So
And venerate them around the world. I mean, how many churches have a shard of the cross in a reliquary or in their altars around the world? And it's massive. It's been distributed literally in every continent and almost every nation, I'm sure.
Doesn't St. Peter's have on every point in the church the cross? Because it's shaped like a cross. Don't they have a part of the cross in every?
Oh, absolutely.
corner? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Now, to start digging into the historical record, I thought we could do this kind of chronologically. And one of the really, I think, interesting things from the very, very deep, misty past is how mankind really first got to know God and what archaeological record shows about that initial engagement. When did people start to understand that among the pantheon of all these, pagan gods that they had worshipped, when does Yahweh start to enter into the historical record? Now,
You probably think it was somewhere around like Abraham.
see, but we don't really have archaeological record of Abraham. The best that we can surmise is that he was probably around between the years 25 BC and 1800 BC, 2500 and 1800 BC, somewhere in there, because there's really not. I mean, he was just a random guy from
Then I'm gonna guess Egypt.
And a nomad too. So like even in relationship to like setting up metropolitan cities, that wasn't really the norm of that day. So to be able to dig in and to see a settlement would have been very, very unique for Abraham's time and age, really.
Gotcha.
Right. But the first record, the first possible mention that archaeologists have ever discovered of the word Yahweh and the use of Yahweh comes from a 15th century BCE inscription in Egypt from the Temple of Soleb by Amenhotep III, right? Now, to understand why you're going to be finding archaeological evidence of Yahweh in Egypt, you have to understand the history at the time. A lot of the rulers of the time really wanted to self-aggrandize and to support their own power base. And what they would do is, because biblical archaeology typically centers around, the Hebrews and the Christians who were not historically powerful people, most of their settlements ultimately were destroyed. So therefore, the only times that we're really going to find very strong mentions of them are by the people who conquered them. And in this mention on one of these columns in the Temple of Amenhotep III, the first mention that archaeologists say this is probably about Yahweh, it mentioned the Shashu of Yahu in the land of Yahu, right? So that was basically saying Shasu was the Egyptian way of saying nomads. And they said in this thing that Amenhotep had conquered these people. And they said the Shashu of, this group and this god and this god. But they say the Shashu of YHW. So they say this is probably the first time anyone actually recorded the word Yahoo, and they were saying that the Egyptian had conquered these nomadic people who believed in Yahoo.
So this is like an Egyptian temple or a scroll?
Yeah, no, it's an Egyptian temple.
Okay.
It's the Temple of Soleb, built by Amenhotep III.
Isn't that in a museum? Is it in the Louvre or something like that?
No,
or?
that's a different one, and we're going to get to that one. So this one is still there at the temple. Now, the one I think that you're talking about.
I've been to the Louvre. With my Indiana Jones hat on years ago.
And a bullwhip?
Well, I had to conceal the bullwhip, really.
You had to leave that at the front.
He went as a monk and he used the bullwhip as a signature, and he's like,
it's my signature.
Tricked you. I think the one that you're talking about is the Mesha Stelae, or the Moabite stone.
Yes.
Now, this is the first one where they know more or less for certain that this is definitely a certain mention of Yahweh. So this one, that one is in the Louvre, and it mentions the house of David, right? So this is also a very important thing because it says, look, this is the first time that the house of David and Yahweh are mentioned, and this was from...
That's obviously not from...
And clearly, like from that nomadic reference to Yahweh to now more of a settlement and a house of David, which is pretty interesting progress that the house of David and the children of Israel.
Now this one's really interesting because this one, contrary to most of the other things that we're going to discuss, this one is actually saying that the house of David conquered these people because they were saying the King Mesha of Moab was basically saying that their God was angry at them and allowed them to be conquered by the house of David, that's pretty cool. So this is probably from the year about 9th century BCE, right? BC. So that's the first time where the earlier reference in Egypt, that is conjecture. It's very similar. It's probably the same. This one is certain. They know that this is talking directly about it. You know, you saw that?
Yeah, when I went to the Louvre. And interesting too is just, you know, when you consider Egypt is one of that amazing powerhouses of an established, you know, settlement. And you could see how this is kind of set in the world as, you know, one of the world's marvels. And that's why we continue to try to uncover the history and the archaeology of this great civilization. Yeah. Because it's fascinating. It's not like we have like Mesopotamia as intact as we do in relationship to Egypt. So but very contemporary.
Now, a really cool thing about this, the Mesha stone, is that it more or less confirms 2 Kings chapter 3. And in 2 Kings chapter 3, at the time, there was the United Kingdom of Israel, which was the north and the south, Judah and all the 12 tribes, right? But then the Bible, read it. It's very interesting, but it's also very...
The Bible's very interesting?
No, the history of the house of David and the United Kingdom and, you know, Samaria and Judah, right? But it's a laborious read. But in 2 Kings 3, it says that Jehoram of Israel and then Jehoshaphat of Judah united, right, to fight this king and won. And this stone actually confirms that that's there. So I mean, it's taking this biblical account of God's work in the Holy Land and in Cana to basically prop up his chosen people, and it confirms it in the archaeological record. So it's a really important find.
That's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, another one that's like that is the Tel Dan Stelae. No, it's not the Steely Dan. Okay. You asked that, and it's not that. Yeah. So again, this is a very direct reference to the house of David, right? Now, a lot of the archaeology a lot of the problems that we have in the Middle East really relates to the historicity of the Jewish people inhabiting that land. And a lot of times they say, well, no, they weren't really there. But this really does prove that the king of Israel and that the house of David was there. The Bible is accurate. They have a long history of occupying the land, and it really holds up their claim to the Jewish right to occupy that area. So this one talks about Hezekiah, Joram. These are all people in the Bible. Ahab, the house of David. It's a really pretty. This is what most archaeologists say is probably the most important find of biblical archaeology is related to the Old Testament.
And it's very important to recognize exactly what we've been saying, that this backs up what we have contained in Scripture and what the tradition of our beliefs are in relationship to occurrences where God has showed his hand in the midst of the children of Israel overcoming their foes or enemies and really being an established house of true worship of monotheism.
Yeah. So this was found in 1993, 1994. And in lines 8 and 9 of it, it specifically mentions the king of Israel and the house of David. And that is just, I mean, to be able to find that in the archaeological record, and that it's not just the king of Israel, it's the house of David. So it shows that Davidic dynasty, right? And this would be before the diaspora, where they were, taken off to Babylon and the Babylonian captivity. So it's a really important find that is super interesting to archaeologists.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple last things from the Old Testament, because I think the Old Testament's a little bit more obscure for most people. One of the really cool things that they found were the actual seals of Isaiah and King Hezekiah. Right? So these are the seals that they would, when they were doing an official document, they would have stamped it on there with their
on wax.
On wax, right? So of the actual prophet Isaiah and King Hezekiah, who, if my Bible memory is correct, is the one that really reestablished temple worship and opened the Ark of the Covenant and found the law of David, the law of Moses in there, and established what most people would consider the temple worship of the Jews that would have been familiar to Jesus.
So are you talking about they found a seal just for King Hezekiah, not for Isaiah?
No, of Isaiah and Hezekiah.
But Isaiah wouldn't have a seal. He wasn't a...
Isaiah was the prophet. He was in the office of the prophet.
Okay.
So the office of the prophet and the office of the king were both part of the government.
Oh, wow. So the prophet was kind of,
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. See, I consider prophets almost aside from that, just, because they all get sacked and, they kind of have that rough job of
confronting,
sharing the word of God, and usually it's in a contentious time to authorities.
See, but Hezekiah was one of those kings who actually listened to the prophet.
Gotcha. But there is an office. I think that's the important thing. I think for listeners, there is an office for that.
So these are actually found 3 feet apart from each other at the foot of the Temple Mount. So there's been a couple excavations of the Temple Mount, but it's really so contentious. No one's allowed to excavate around it.
Yeah, it's a pretty dicey situation.
But I think 15, maybe 10 to 20 years ago, they did some excavations and they just scraped out a ton of land, the Palestinian Authority, and took the land and just dumped it. So it removed the stratification of being able to understand it. So they're still going through these big mounds of dirt and earth and finding all kinds of things. But without the context of the stratification, it's hard for them to find that.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mean the levels?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, where was this? You're trying to piece things together.
Yeah, you have to piece
and
it
the
together.
Temple of the Mount is in Jerusalem. It's the Wailing Wall, right? And then beyond that.
And in that process of delineating time, that's how you analyze what time frame these archaeological finds.
It's kind of like a tree, It's got like layers to it, and you can kind of identify how old it is from the
So, a real quick rundown of some other things that archaeologists have found that support the Bible and the Old Testament. They found the cities of Hazor, Dan, Megiddo, Shechem, Samaria, Shiloh, Gezer, Beth Shemesh, all these cities in the Bible that, you think, it's a city. It's easy. Just look it up on a map. That's not how it works. I mean, these cities were 3,000 years ago, and they've been covered by years of sediment, debris, and ruins,
construction.
You got to look for Gezer.
Yeah, you do.
You got to look for the geezer, man.
I'll
tell you, Sonny.
Hey, don't you come around here no more.
They found evidence from Kings 14 and 2 Chronicles of Shishak's invasion of Judah, the Moabite stone, the obelisk of Shalmaneser III, which is from, again, 2 Kings, the burial plaque of King Uzziah. Right? I mean, this is one of the kings. I mean, the cylinder of Cyrus the Great that's permitting the Jews of the captivity to go back and reestablish the temple. I mean, there is a lot of evidence supporting the Old Testament, even though it's so obscure and so long ago and a relatively inconsequential people in the history and the power structure of the Middle East.
Right.
They found a lot of this stuff. Pretty cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's like Magdala too. I mean, you would think the Sea of Galilee, you would have archaeological evidence just kind of poking out, and there's just a lot of stuff they're uncovering.
Yeah, but this area, I mean, this was the crossroads of the world. I mean, you have the Persians and the Assyrians on one side, you have the Hittites, and then you have the Egyptians on the other side, and then you have the Greeks and the Romans to the, everywhere else. I mean, everyone's coming through here.
It's a perfect trade post. I mean, it's a perfect point of contact of all of those great nations and peoples.
It connected North Africa, the Orient, and Europe, and because of that, everyone was always fighting for it. So, I mean, the archaeological record there is just a network of scars of history showing burn layers and destruction and different powers coming in. I mean, so it's a
Spending time in the Holy Land, going to Tel Aviv. I wound up staying in Tel Aviv for a couple of days when I traveled there by myself, my first trip. And I was just walking around and I discovered, just providentially, I really don't pull out maps. I just pull out my rosary and I just walk around and I pray the rosary and I discover things. And I discovered in the ancient city of Jaffa that the house where Peter had that apparition of, what I have
Where
made
God said
clean.
it's cool to eat bacon?
Yeah, it's cool to eat bacon. That's
Wow.
an important
That's a
house.
holy site.
Oh, it's
That's
a very holy site.
Yeah, it's a holy
But
site.
right next to that it was an Egyptian outpost. So, they had this Egyptian archaeological site where they uncovered what was being done there and trade and all these other types of things going on right there in the ancient city of Jaffa.
Yep.
That's a big trading area.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Big
So
trading
now,
area.
jumping into the New Testament, you guys were mentioning the Sea of Galilee. Our Lord's ministry really was centered around Galilee. It was not too much in Judea. It was around all these cities in.
It was in Judea when it was time to do the Jewish thing, right? It was when it was time to go to the temple, or during Passover, and I mean, he made trips. I'm sure, right?
So of course he did. He was like a proper Jewish adherent. He would go to the temple every year. But there's a network of cities kind of supported by the Romans. There is the Decapolis, and then there's a lot of villages like Magdala and Nazareth and Capernaum, all these cities that you've heard in the Bible, but they're villages. I mean, maybe 2,000 people. And then over time they got abandoned, and you can't just find them anymore.
Yeah, and it's around a lake that's probably not even as big as Lake Tahoe,
I like that he uses Tahoe as the reference.
I when I got there, I was like, the Sea of Galilee. I'm like, this is like Lake Tahoe or something, No, I mean, it was beautiful, but I was just thinking the size.
So the one city in Galilee that you really could say was Jesus's home base was Capernaum. I mean, I think
Peter's house.
I think 6 of the apostles were from Capernaum. That's where he centered his ministry from. And that was, for all intents and purposes, that was the first Vatican. That was the first center of the church, was this tiny little fishing village on the Galilee.
And in a sense, the first church as well, the first place of gathering.
That's what we're going to talk about. They actually did find what would have been the very first church, and that was St. Peter's house.
Yep, I've been there.
You were?
I've been there too.
I've been there.
Yeah,
It's really
very cool place. And it has this not eerie sense of silence, but almost like a permeating reverence that you feel when you're walking around this holy site.
You can access a lot there too. I was pretty surprised, that there were a lot of things that really weren't closed off, that you could walk through the town. And I do think they had a synagogue there too, didn't they? Yeah,
They found a synagogue too there where he would have preached. In Matthew 8, it talks about St. Peter's mother-in-law having the fever, right? And his mother-in-law would have been living with him. That would have been the custom at the time. And Jesus entering the house and healing his mother-in-law. This is where that miracle would have happened, right? And they found this. They were in 1968. Archaeologists started working on what they saw as the remains of a Byzantine-era church, and it was an octagonal-shaped church. And then as they started excavating it, they noticed that below that, and so the Byzantine era would have been, 500-600s.
Yeah.
But below that, they noticed a 1st century AD house, a very simple house that had Christian inscriptions on it. They had a picture of the Ascension, had an area for worship. It had a baptistry. And so they had converted. So why was there one house in Capernaum, right on the shores was... And all the conjecture and all of the archaeological evidence basically points to that this was actually St. Peter himself. This was his house. This was the first See of Peter. This was the Vatican. This is where the first pope actually would be holding mass right after the Ascension.
And this is also where we could really ascertain that Peter was a very successful man. He was, on the north shore of the Galilee. Really at a trade.
The north side.
The north side.
He's not from the south side.
Yeah, he's not from the south side. He's from the north
Reno.
side.
Yeah.
But,
he would watch the Galilean Cubs play, not the Galilean White Sox, right?
So Jesus highlighted that point of interest, and all these people in this town would have been excellent fishermen. And that was the competitive trade of the day. And Peter, being so successful in that prime real estate where he had his house, I mean, North Shore is a nice shore.
That's a nice area. That's a good zip code.
Absolutely. Good
Schools
zip
are
code to
great.
have. Schools are great.
And all the things that are around it too. You had the multiplication of the loaves. It's on a hill just by there.
Yeah.
So a lot of the miracles that Jesus performed were just in that little area.
And over 90% of his ministry in the scriptures that we have contained is all around the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
And principally, like, a greater concentration of that is in the northern part of the Galilee. And when it's interesting too to think of the roadways to Nazareth,
right,
from there,
and Cana,
and all of these other locations.
It wasn't far.
No.
I mean, these are like 5-mile walks.
Yeah.
These are small villages kind of just centered around fishing and then the supporting of that trade. And, so.
Yeah,
But what I like to consider is Jesus making his way all the way down the River Jordan from the Sea of Galilee and descending all the way down into the Dead Sea, and right at the mouth of the Dead Sea being baptized by John. I just love thinking about that and the path itself and how long that took, and the conversations and the meditation and the prayer that happened all the way to the point of this anticipation of his public ministry. And he's descending into the lowest point on earth, and then he's submerged in the waters that is at the mouth of nothingness and of aridity and the desert and lifelessness. And he's submerged into our death in this world, literally, not just the human peril, but earthly peril. And he's submerged there, and then he rises from the waters and then makes his way to open up that ministry, the beautiful ministry that we continue to adore and worship as a people of God.
Yeah, I think it's cool how God uses, creation and topography in this case, to kind of, speak to us. There's a lot of things that go on, with, we were talking on another episode, Golgotha, and how God uses certain places to,
and where Adam, yeah, exactly, like where Adam died, and then where Jesus died, and the restoration of Adam, that from the earth, from the clay, that God formed man. So even in relationship to the topography that you just referenced, why is archaeology so important?
Right.
Because we're discovering these realities. Why should we know where Golgotha is? Why should we know and isolate where Jesus was actually baptized? Not commemoratively, like further up the to the Sea of Galilee that he was baptized in this kind of nice place.
There's a place there.
There's a place that you can kind of commemorate that.
It's a good swim, but
it's a good swim.
The
other aspect of it is you really can't reach that area where Jesus was when you go to the Dead Sea. It's really hard to get there. But to consider that, he was actually near the Essene community. He was near a place of austerity and discipline and prayer and where the mitzvah cleansings and washings were taking place and people were sacrificing and living celibacy, to observe all of those things. And it's important for us to really dig in, pun intended, to these archaeological sites so that we can be more firmly rooted in the actuality of our faith and how it was lived out.
All right, so you mentioned John the Baptist, and one of the places that the archaeologists have actually found is the site where they would consider that Jesus would have been baptized by John the Baptist, and that's the Qasr al-Yahud, right? And that's that it means the castle of the Jews in Hebrew. And what was found here was this goes back to the 4th century in Helena, right? They found traditional baptistry there. They found evidence of John the Baptist having operated in the area. And tradition says that this is also the place where, during the conquest of Cana, that the Jews would have crossed over the Jordan River at this point to, under Joshua. And to this day, I think the Pope actually went there 4 or 5 years ago to this site. It's right kind of south of Jericho, right around in that area. And it's still Jordan River, and people still go there to get baptized to this day. It's a pretty cool place. Now, there's a couple competing sites for it. There's some, because obviously tourism is a very big industry over there, and there's a couple competing sites. One's actually in Jordan, and one's actually on the other side. So both countries are trying to, I guess, give credence to their claim because it's a very important site for people to make a pilgrimage to.
And as we mentioned before, you know, it's important for archaeological discovery and accuracy of archaeology so that we could really highlight and isolate exactly where these locations would be, because obviously the significance of where the Jews would have crossed the Jordan and then where Jesus himself was submerged in the waters is kind of an interesting point, right? So it's
also
important to recognize that.
It's also where, according to tradition, the prophet Elijah would have ascended to heaven as well.
Yes, yeah. So there's a lot of different connections and connotations, but this isn't to kind of play down these other locations where commemoration of action has been honored for centuries. So, you know, like the Sermon on the Mount, for example, was that the exact place that Jesus gave his sermon? Or, you know, other places of memorial, is this the exact place? You know,
A lot of them, yes. Some of them, no.
But the fact that people and millions of people have made pilgrimages to these locations, the fact that they are reverencing God and reverencing these realities in Old Testament and New Testament says something, and there is a power to that of consideration as well.
There's grace too.
Yeah, there's absolute
Lots
grace.
of grace.
Yeah.
So moving on from that and starting to get to, I guess, more towards the end of the Gospels, Pontius Pilate. Now, Pontius Pilate was not Jewish. He was not a Christian. He was the Roman prelate put in charge of the Roman occupation of Judea. And now this one, you would think, well, obviously this is the Romans kept great records, but there's not a lot about Pontius Pilate in the Roman records because he was, you know, in the Romans' view, he was a minor governor of a minor area that they, you know, he wasn't very widely celebrated. But they actually found that Pontius Pilate, there was an inscription because he built in, I think it was in Caesarea. He built that city, and there was an inscription where Pontius Pilate was dedicating this city to the Emperor Tiberius. And Tiberius reigned from 14 to 37 AD. And this Pontius Pilate's rule was 26 to 36 AD, which really, if you look at that, 26 to 36 AD, that is directly in line with what Catholic tradition typically says, is that the crucifixion happened between 30 and 33 AD. So right there's a very direct archaeological evidence of at least a time frame of the ministry of Jesus Christ and his execution.
And again, this is all narrowing in more precision. And again, the importance of archaeology to narrow in with precision to be able to back up with evidence that is actually tangible evidence for these realities.
Wasn't there a big historian like Josephus or something like that?
Josephus, yes.
Josephus, yeah. He wrote a lot.
Josephus is probably the most important early source that we have of post-Christian history in the Holy Land. But he also talks about a lot of things. He talks about the destruction of the temple. He talks about the Bar Kokhba revolution. He talks about Jesus' execution. I mean,
he's an important.
It is incredibly important. If you're into, if you are into early Christian and Jewish archaeology from the 1st to 2nd century, you really need to read Josephus Flavius. You have to read it. Now, another thing that they found, that archaeologists have found, is the ring of Pontius Pilate.
Cool. Right. In his tomb or something?
No. So it was actually...
And this is how he would seal different documents and letters.
Knock people out.
Yeah.
Bust a tooth.
Put his sign on somebody's forehead. Yeah.
Come here. Like Rick James. It said Unity on it. So no, this was actually found in a Herodian fortress. So King Herod would have been kind of a vassal king to the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And this was basically would have been the ring of a Roman cavalry, right? So this would have basically showed that whomever this ring belonged to, it had bared the inscription of Pontius Pilate in a Herodian temple. So I'm sorry, a Herodian fortress. So this would have been the soldiers under the direct command of Pontius Pilate. So again, that really is in the archaeological record, irrefutable proof that Pontius Pilate was a historical figure. And that starts to build that, at least evidentially, that circumstantial case for the veracity of the accounts, the historical accounts of the New Testament.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like, you see a lot of people in secular world media that they dismiss a lot of the things in the Bible, because you got stories in there where, a guy's in a whale's mouth for 3 days. And, a lot of this stuff is
They
just
actually found that whale. Inside it said Jonah was here.
Yeah,
so like this is food wrappers and stuff too.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Is that another part of this show here?
It's not.
That's the last archaeological discovery that we're
that's
going to
what that's actually what got me disbarred from the archaeological forums. So 2 more things that I think are worth noting, and we've covered this one and another one, but that they found the bones of St. Peter under the Vatican. That is, now there's a really great book out there. It's called The Bones of St. Peter, the first full account of the discovery of the Apostles' Tomb. You can go and find this book and read a lot about it. But what had happened is that
what had happened?
See, what had happened was, let me tell you.
Here's how this goes down.
English? I don't know.
What had happened is proper English.
Okay,
absolutely.
What had happened?
Mrs. Walsh, you'll back me up on that. So they were doing some renovations of St. Peter's, and you guys have both been to the catacombs under St. Peter's, right? St. Peter's was built. There was a hill to the right transept of it. And it was built into that. And along the base of this hill was a Roman street. And along this, there would have been a lot of tombs, because a lot of back in those days, they built tombs along the side of the roads outside of the cities, because that when people walking past it, they would see you and commemorate you. So after the execution of Peter, they would have taken him into this tomb. And then over time, like Constantine would have, the church would have built on top of it, and they would have backfilled it. But this Roman street is still there. So they're doing renovations, and they got down to the lowest level of this Roman era street, and there was what they called a red wall. And there was a graffiti on there that said Petri inni, right? Which means Peter is inside here.
Yeah.
And inside of a crack of it, they were able to see a small box, a silver reliquary box, and in it were the bones of and scientifically examined, of a 1st century Judean male who would have been about 60 years old, who would have been kind of a rougher stock, kind of, thick dude, and was wrapped in purple and gold threads inside of it. And I mean, this, they went through all the archaeology, and it took a long time for them to announce this, because they wanted to make sure that they were being very meticulous with their archaeological methodology. But yeah, the Pius XII, Paul VI, they both said, look, no, we've found, if you had found any other person's bone that said Peter was here with a 2,000-year tradition that's saying that this person was buried here, then you found 1st century corroborating graffiti, then bones that were treated with a very particular reverence with gold and purple cloth, and they were genetically the same of a Judean male. I mean, this is...
And there was like signs at the feet where he was crucified.
It was missing
upside.
the feet. It was missing feet.
Missing feet.
Yeah.
And how the graffiti grew in concentration and number as you move closer to the tomb, which was very striking.
Yeah, Peter's that way. Peter's that way.
Yeah, so you have graffiti, and you have different tombs in different places along that roadway when you're going through that archaeological site underneath the Vatican.
Yeah.
And then as you're moving closer, you're seeing the graffiti grow in concentration right up to the point of where the tomb is.
Yep.
Yeah. It's fascinating how much Rome is built on top of other things.
And that goes right back to what we were talking about
Fascinating.
before. Yeah.
Fascinating.
But it creates a complicated scenario for archaeologists to be able to dig.
Yeah, they just fill in stuff and then build stuff
on top of it.
When they first found this, they ran upstairs and they're like, "Hey, Pope, you need to come take a look at this." So Pius XII actually went down through the archaeological dig, went down from all these different layers with a lantern, and actually viewed it himself, and was just absolutely in complete amazement when he was looking at his first predecessor. I can only imagine.
That's outstanding.
I can only imagine the power of that moment where you have this. Pope Pius XII was a very, I don't want to say demure, but he was a very polished man. He was an amazing diplomat. He was a very political person. Mm-hmm. But for him to get down in the, into the dirt with a lantern and be confronted with the bones of the first pope, and to have that link to history and that connection must have been just a mind-blowing experience.
When I studied in Rome in Santa Croce, friends of mine, newly ordained guys from the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee, Father Will Gansey, big shout out to him.
Yeah.
We celebrated Mass at the altar in the Clementine Chapel, which is the closest altar to the remains of Saint Peter himself. And it was just a very powerful moment. But the anticipation of going back there as a newly ordained priest in 2013, I prepared my aunt and uncle who did not get married in the church for convalidation, and I celebrated that ritual within the context of the liturgy right there next to the bones of St. Peter, and was a very special moment for my family to be able to celebrate that Mass down there.
Yeah, isn't it under the altar too?
It
like
is.
in St. Peter. So if you were to like look at where the bones were, unbeknownst to, or maybe knowingly, the construction of St. Peter's in the 1500s or 1400s, whenever it was, that either by coincidence or by
Providence and divine intervention.
That those bones are underneath that altar.
So much so that you could drop, a penny from the middle of the cupola down through the baldacchino, through the main altar, down into the tomb area of, St. Peter.
Wow.
Dropping a penny from that height would be dangerous. Didn't they ever tell you not to
Get
drop
out of
pennies
the
up?
way!
Yeah, zing.
There's a penny coming.
I'd drop a quarter.
That would be way more
Well, that's
dangerous
because
than a penny.
you're just, you're a baller and you just
I'd just throw money out, like, yeah.
So last thing I want to talk about is the first graphic representation the archaeological record has of Jesus Christ. Do you guys know what it is?
Yes.
Only because I told you.
Yeah, no.
It's a picture of
Hold
like
on, don't ruin it.
Okay, well then don't ask me.
Yeah, then why are you asking?
I
What is this?
I should have told
You're
you
like
beforehand.
my kids,
No,
Yeah.
I'm like your father. I shouldn't have told you beforehand. I was setting you
You're
up for the
ruining the
reveal. You're supposed to
moment.
say, "No, Ryan, tell me." That's how that show works.
No, Ryan, tell me.
Tell me,
There you go.
Ryan. No more beers the night before and telling you guys all my tricks, right? So the first graphic representation that they found of Jesus in the archaeological record is called the Alexamenos graffito, or sometimes called the graffito blasphemo, right? Or the
Blasphemy.
Yeah. So this was found on a building on the Palatine Hill in Rome that was probably owned by the Emperor Caligula. And this is dated to sometime in the late 2nd century. And what it is basically this house that Caligula owned was for, I guess, imperial page boys, right? So maybe soldiers, maybe servants of the emperor. And so there's a bunch of presumably dudes in there, and they're all younger, and they're all kind of teasing each other. Well, somebody wrote a graffiti making fun of this one guy who lived there, Alexamenos, a Greek. And it's a picture of Alexamenos, and then there is a crucified man with a donkey's head. And the graffiti says, Alexamenos worships his God. So the first actual archaeological record that we have of Jesus Christ in imagery is him as a crucified man with a donkey's head.
And we'll post this, and the artist is definitely not an artist. You could tell.
No, you could tell that this was a crude graffiti.
This was a blasphemous form of making fun of somebody. I'll never forget when I went through my reversion experience. I really started accepting the faith and really entering into the teachings of Jesus and really entering into worship, receiving the Eucharist, going to the Sacrament of Reconciliation. I was at church every day. And it was such a remarkable change of life that people in my hometown, they were like, what's Richie doing? He's wearing like a cross around his neck. He's, he's not going to the clubs anymore. He's not going to Daytona Beach and blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget, I was walking into Walmart, and 3 guys that I played ball with for many, many years, D-Rock said to me, he's like, "Oh, Richie, you found Jesus? Oh, we're so happy for you found Jesus. You found Jesus." And he was just making fun of me, and in that same vein, it's that same type of poking at somebody that because they're a faithful Catholic or they're a faithful, Jew or they're a faithful anything. It's like, because you're a faithful person, we're gonna kind of blast you with that. And that's important to realize that from the very beginning and the first depiction, there was blasphemy and there was persecution and there was, ridicule for what you believe in.
So one of the interesting things is that, so number one, to Roman society, showing somebody crucified would have been like, for us showing like a picture of someone in an electric chair. I mean, this was not a glorious thing. This was This is as worse as you get. This was the worst punishment the Roman Empire could give to a person. Now, another thing is that why a donkey's head? So there was the slur that was leveled at the Jews and the Christians at the times that they actually worshiped their God in the form of a donkey, right? Because this shows you how little the Romans actually knew of the proper religion of the Jewish and Christian people. And Tertullian, in one of his documents, wrote that Origen repeats in his treatise Contra Celsum that the pagan philosopher Celsus made the claim against Christians and Jews that their God is personified by a donkey. So when you put that together with Tertullian, Origen, so you're basically saying, look, this guy is completely mocking Alexamenos, saying, you worship a donkey who is crucified. This is the most idiotic God anyone could ever worship. How stupid are you? And I think that's a really poetically fitting that's the first record that we have of Jesus is mockery. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, you'd think you'd have something between when he died or even when he was living, right? Some sort of artistic, but between that and the late first century, second century.
But you got to imagine the persecution they were under. Look, if they found you, they would destroy
around with a necklace or anything like that.
No, that's
dangerous.
That's no bueno.
Yeah, cool, man.
Yeah,
been a good episode.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we're going to take it easy on you. Any questions on this time? And why don't you just tell everyone how they can follow us, dig in more?
Okay. So my friends, please continue to journey with us with the Catholic Talk Show by subscribing on all of our platforms, certainly visiting our website at catholictalkshow.com, as well as connecting with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And by that, we continue to develop this relationship and move forward and continue to journey closer together in this beautiful contribution of our faith and history and having a little fun along the way. So as we journey, don't forget, continue to support us financially by going to patreon.com, Catholic Talk Show, and that's a way that you can help us grow the show. And we wish you and all of your beautiful journeys ahead that you may dig in deep to your faith, review some of this archaeology stuff, and really firmly establish yourself no matter what you face. If you face blasphemy, if you face people mocking you because of your faith, remember you stand on very firm foundations and you don't need to be fearful of any word that comes against you for the faith that you profess in Jesus Christ. God bless you.